Trust. It's such an interesting and important topic, especially when we want to be our client's trusted advisor. So this week we're having a beautiful conversation with Lea Brovedani. I'm practicing my Italian here, who is really known as the trust architect. And she is one of the top 100 thought leader on the topic of trust. It's a conversation on how to build trust. What are the traps that we get caught up? We talk about the difference between trust and reputation and how really like the things that we think we're building trust, but we're actually just building reputation. And what really should we be taking care of? And she talks about her framework as well on how to build trust. So make yourself a tea or a decaf coffee because this is a beautiful conversation so you can become a trusted advisor. Thank you, Lea, for being with us today. And thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
My pleasure.
Today we're going to talk, I think trust is one of the most important topic when we run a service-based business, basically when we actually have any interaction with other humans, but just particularly when we run a service-based business. But before we get into the topic of trust, if you could take a moment just to introduce yourself so people know who you are.
Well, as you said, Sarah, my name's Lea Brovedani, and I'm known as the trust architect because I help people kind of design the structures in their own personal lives that build trust. And so many people know trust is important, but they don't really understand what trust is. So I clear up a lot of confusion. You know, those companies that say trust is the most important aspect of our business? Well, a lot of times I help them figure out what that looks like and how they can improve it. So according to Trust Across America, I'm one of less than 100 top thought leaders in trust. And this year I actually received a Lifetime Achievement Award as a top thought leader in trust. It's what I do, it's what I talk about, and what I help people figure out how to be more trusted, how to determine whether they can trust somebody else. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you. And I love the concept because so in the audience are people that are going to watching us are a lot of people in financial services, accounting services, tax specialists, legal specialists, and basically entrepreneurs who are positioning themselves as the trusted advisor. Now, the term is a beautiful term, but what does it mean? And that is really where I'd like us to dig in today, because it's nice to say, I want to be your trusted advisor, but what does it mean? So could we first start by putting a definition or a context on around what is trust really?
Okay. Well, trust is your ability to be open and vulnerable based upon positive expectations about somebody else's behavior or actions, or a company's behaviors and actions. I'm sorry. Usually my dog is relegated to the outside. I trusted that he would stay downstairs. I can trust my dog to save my life, but not to eat my sandwich or not come upstairs. So
That's okay.
a little diversion there. So really, when you talk about vulnerability, and I remember when I started business, people would say, Lea, you can't talk about vulnerability. Companies don't want to be vulnerable. It means that they're open to bad things happening too. But
Yeah.
vulnerability is all about courage. Trust is about not exactly knowing what's going to happen, but having the courage to believe in someone or something.
Oh, that's huge. Because so if we back up a bit, because you said a key word, vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely not my favorite word. Definitely not. Because like many people, I associate vulnerability to weakness.
Absolutely. And it's not. It is such a strength.
Mm.
It's so like if you want to not trust anybody, well, you might protect yourself in some regards, but it takes courage in order to allow someone to be in your little trust circle. Do you know the work of Brene Brown?
Yes.
Don't you love her? I mean,
I don't know. One of her book, I'm not sure which one, she says, vulnerability is not weakness, it's a strength. And I closed the book and I'm like, okay, I'll come back later.
So here's one of her quotes. Vulnerability feels like courage and sounds like truth. And although truth can feel a little bit frightening, it is never a weakness. It is always a strength to be vulnerable. It's a strength to have to put yourself out there, because the weak can kind of block themselves off and never remain vulnerable at all. But it takes a lot of courage to say, okay, I'm going to give you this leap of faith. And that does not mean that you jump in and you've heard bad things about him and you think, oh, I'm going to open myself to be vulnerable. There has to be some intelligence to it. So part of the change that I do is that I studied emotional intelligence for a long, long time. And emotional intelligence really is not about just having full reign on your emotions. It means about putting emotions with intelligence. And that's where emotional intelligence combines, is emotions and intelligence. And it's the same with vulnerability. It's using emotional intelligence. It's knowing when to be vulnerable and when to say, okay, I need more information.
So if I want to be a trusted advisor, so if we put it in a business context for people watching, if I want to be a trusted advisor, a trusted professional, the first is I need to open up to vulnerability. Because without vulnerability, what I'm hearing is there is no trust.
Yes. And in the financial advisor industry, people are going to usually come into a situation being a little hesitant, and they're not going to completely trust. And I don't believe they should. I don't believe that anyone
should blind trust. Yes.
I'm not going to come in and say, okay, you're my trusted advisor. Here's my money. Do with it what you want. I completely trust you. That would just be foolish.
Yes.
So you need to recognize that people are going to be coming to you feeling a little untrust, like they're not going to feel the trust. And so what they want to hear, and I call it my 5-tenet model, what they're going to want to hear: caring, commitment, consistency, competence, and communication. First of all, they want to know that you care enough about them that they are safe with you. So it is about those feelings of being cared for, that you care about what happens in their future, that you are committed, not just in this moment, but 5 months down the line, whatever is happening to them, they want to know that you are committed to their well-being even further down the line, that you've made that commitment to them. You do what you say you'll do long after the time you first said you would do it.
Yes.
So competence, obviously, that you have the skills, that you know what you're going to be doing. So if you start talking about, here's where we're going to invest your money, and today it looks really good, that let's invest it in blah. You know?
Yes. And we all know, like, the past is not guaranteed of the future. So
yeah, they want to see some competence there.
yes.
So caring, commitment, competence, caring, commitment, consistency, that they know that what you're telling them today is going to be the same thing that you're telling them tomorrow. Yes. That there's some consistency in the actions, and consistency shows up with actions and words. So if what you tell me doesn't align with what I see as your actions, that's not consistent, and that's where my trust radar starts.
So do as you say and say as you do.
Yes, absolutely. And then communication, making sure that you're communicating all this, that in times of strife or times of trouble, you need to almost over communicate.
Yes. Where sometimes we tend to not want to communicate because these are stressful times.
And I don't want to give people bad news. I don't want to call up and say to them, listen, you know that sure thing I told you about? Yeah, not so much. You know, honestly, people trust people who are transparent and give the bad news and the good. If you think that you are going to hide all the bad news, if it comes out later and they find out that you didn't tell them,
It's
It's a
worse.
lot worse than telling them when it happens. I mean, you want to get all of the information. So if you're constantly running to them every time something doesn't look good, but you haven't done the research, then they're going to kind
Well,
of,
the competence part is not there. If
yeah,
that's what you're doing, the
absolutely.
competence part is not there. And I love how like competence is not the first thing.
No,
We tend to put competence at the top of the list when really trust competence is not at the top of the list.
no, it's not. Okay, I just want to think of the scenario of someone that you've met who is absolutely brilliant, but treats everybody with disdain.
Yes. Oh, we all know at least one person.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And so when you think of them, do you really trust them? Oh, yeah, they've got all the skills, they've got the ego to go along with it, but is that who you want to work with?
Oh.
Do you
So
trust them?
so if we look at mistakes or traps that people get stuck into, that really prevents them from being trustworthy and trusting, what would be like the biggest traps that you see people doing or not doing?
Mistaking reputation for trust. And you
Oh,
hear that, like this has become such an overused meme that it takes a lifetime to build trust and only minutes to completely destroy it. They're
yes.
not talking about trust. They're talking about reputation. So it might take a lifetime to build a reputation and only minutes to destroy it. But if you've been operating in a trustworthy way, if you have, and one of the things, and I'm going to quote a colleague of mine because he's also in the top thought leaders,
Mhm.
his father, so there's two Stephen Coveys, just for everybody who knows, there's the older Stephen Covey who passed, but he talked about building an emotional bank account. And he
Mm,
said that if you're constantly putting into this bank account, then if you have to suddenly make a withdrawal because you screw up, there's a reserve in there and it's not going to deplete the account. So
yes.
I kind of see a reputation the same way, that if you have built trust into that bank account, if you've established a lot by being caring, by showing people you're competent, by committing to them, by doing what you say you'll do, by communicating on a regular basis, then that reservoir of trust is deep. And if you
Yes.
screw up, and even a big screw up, you're not going to lose your reputation because it should be built on that reservoir of trust.
So I like we referred a little bit to Brene Brown before, and she has an analogy of trust is like a marble jar.
Yeah, yeah,
And that is one that I use a lot in my family with my kids of, sometimes one of them will ask me something and I'm like, there's no marbles in the marble jar. And I think it's a good way to understand trust that that's it. We put marbles in the marble jar, and there will always be when we care, when we pay attention and we do the first steps you mentioned before, there's going to be marbles in the marble jar.
yeah, yeah. And when we talk about communication,
Yes.
especially if you are providing a service, then it shouldn't be equal. The listening that you do should be greater than the talking that you do. So
Oh, and I think that is a huge trap that intelligent people get stuck in because they are so smart and they want to share the knowledge and the expertise that they have.
yeah,
So they tend to talk more. And
yes, yeah. One of my closest friends, her daughter is absolutely brilliant. I mean, she's got multiple degrees and she was struggling to get a job. And it didn't make sense because she really is beautiful, brilliant, and has a lot of skills to offer. So my friend said, "Well, you talked to her?" And I said, "Yeah." And she was, like she's honestly can
she's got the whole thing.
circles around me as far as her intelligence. But what I said to her is, because she was still in that place where she was going dating. And I said, so when you go on a date, if someone sits and tells you about themselves and how wonderful they are and like how lucky you are to be with them, what do you think of the date? And she went, well, I think he's a jerk and I can't wait to get rid of him. And I went, right. So if you think of most interactions with other companies or even with a client as a date, what are the people that you're really interested in? They're the people who want to know what's important to you. So I said, think of applying for a job as going on a date. You want them to impress you as much as you want to impress them. So yes, give them something about yourself, but then get them to say like, what makes you so special, and let them talk about themselves. So if you think of a client like a contract with a client, especially in the financial business, yeah, you've got all these great qualifications. Are they important to the client?
But am I dancing in my communication?
Yeah, going back and forth, asking questions, letting them talk. So finding out exactly, and don't listen. You know, I'm a voracious reader. So one of the books that I read years and years ago was The Quiet Leadership by David Rock, Dr. David Rock. I don't know if you've read it.
No, it's on the list, but no.
But he talks about all of the different aspects of listening. And one of the mistakes we often make is listening so we can talk next.
Yes. Yes.
So, you know, when you listen, leave aside your agenda. And
we tend to listen to what we're going to say or listen to fix.
Yeah.
And it's just listen to listen.
Yeah, just hear what they say. And then before you talk, make sure that you have heard them. So, you know, we've got all of those things that we learned when we went for all of the people who are part of your audience. Mm-hmm. They've gone through a lot of the courses on paraphrasing or authentic listening. Use those skills. How often do you take that course and then you go, oh, that was really good?
Yeah, because it was a conference at the company symposium, and it was a good 60 minutes. That was very entertaining.
Yeah, yeah. And then you don't use it.
Yeah. So if we understand some of the traps that we get stuck into or that we get trapped into, some of the mistakes that we do, what should we do or could we do to build trust? Let it be with a client, a potential client, a strategic alliance that we want to have, our team, or really in our personal life as well. So what are the keys to build trust?
Okay, I mean, I always say the big cardinal rule is do what you say you'll do. And that's a big one because there's a lot of times we don't think of that if it's a small thing. If I say, okay, Sarah, I will be at the meeting and I'll get there 5 minutes early, and then I'm 10 minutes late. Oh. It's a small thing. But if that happens on a regular basis, then I'm breaking trust. So even on the small things, do what you say you'll do. And if you can't, then go back to the person and let them know. And we often don't do that. We say, well, it's not a big deal. Like I was 5 minutes late. Well, if you know you're going to be 5 minutes late, then call the person and say, listen, I'm going to be 5 minutes late. So like I'm using time because for some people, that's really important. For some other people, it can be something else, but do what you say you'll do is kind of one of the first tenets, I think should be one of the first tenets of trust. And that comes to commitment and consistency.
Yes. And can we circle back also with vulnerability?
Yeah.
So we tend to not want to be vulnerable. But if I want to build trust, is it because often, you know, and I work a lot with an advisor and we talk about, you know, understanding their clients' dreams and goals and, you know, aspirations. And I keep on telling advisors, I'm like, but if you don't share first, the person won't feel safe to share.
Yeah, and that is a big part of vulnerability too. And if you make a mistake, saying to someone, oh, like, you know, like it's still one of the hard ones for me to make when you have kids, I have kids. When you've made a mistake with your kids and you want to be that person in control and you lost your temper or whatever, and sitting down with them and saying, you know, here's what was happening with me on that day. And that sounds like an excuse, but I just want to let you know, I am sorry for, you know, how I want to be with you is to have this kind of a relationship, and you know, like, show them that you're vulnerable as well. So vulnerability, admitting when you've made a mistake. But as a leader, I say, if you're just constantly saying, I messed up, I messed up, I messed up, that's not vulnerability, that's stupidity.
Yeah, it's like if I make a mistake once, it's a mistake, but if I make it more than once, it's a pattern or something like that. Just
Yeah.
saying.
So, you know, if you make a mistake, or if you want to, if something happened, then you say, okay, even if it's not of your choosing. So if there's, especially in the financial industry,
Mhm.
here's what I'm seeing as a huge problem, and being open and vulnerable and letting them know, but have a plan and say, but here's what I'm going to do going forward. So people want to know that even if you're vulnerable, that you've got a plan going forward, and that's going to give them the confidence. So that's part of it.
And I like it because it ties back in with competence. Like, we've made a mistake, this would happen, but this is what we put in place to make sure it doesn't happen. So
Exactly.
for our clients, it actually builds the trust because they know we're human. It happens to everyone to make a mistake, but it's like, okay, but we've ensured that, it doesn't happen again. And I like how you also put it in terms of in our role as a leader, because I think that is also an area where people have, a slight uncomfortable of showing vulnerability and
Right.
building trust with our team. They're not expecting us to be a superhero. But if
Yeah.
we pretend to be a superhero, they won't show, the trust won't be there.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be comfortable saying, well, I messed up, or saying anything that could be emotionally involved.
Yeah. One of the leaders that a colleague had interviewed for a trust workshop that we had built together was head of the Las Vegas Convention Center, and I think it was Mandalay Bay, or one of the big hotels. And so he said, when they build a new casino, it's like close to $1 billion. Like, it's ridiculous. This was a few years ago. I don't know if they're building any more right now. But he said that if one of the people, and he had hundreds and hundreds of people working for him, but if one of them came and said, okay, there's a mistake that happened in the building, and they came to them right away, he said he could throw a lot of money at the problem in
Mm.
the initial phases and correct it. But if the manager hid the problem and they found out 6 months later, well, now they've built on the problem.
Yes.
And now it is not just a small money problem, it is a huge money problem. And he said, and if that situation happens, then it's a different conversation. So he never comes down on people if they make a mistake and they come to him. And he fully discloses, he said, listen, as leader of this organization, I've made mistakes that have cost the company millions of dollars.
Mhm.
And he'll let them know what they are.
Yeah.
So people feel safe disclosing. So if you've got a team of people working for you and you self-disclose mistakes that you've made, you make it safe for them to tell you the same thing. If you punish everybody every time they make a mistake, what they're going to do is hide them. And
Mm.
that's not what you want.
And it's the same with our clients as well, of, having conversation, not just about mistakes of, but feeling maybe the client is stressed or worried and things like that. And say, I too, at one point or something, and, I live the stress and being worried and this and that. And that opens up a whole new level of conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that is what being a trusted advisor is all about.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, you do want someone who has the competence. I don't want to hand over a lot of my money to someone who doesn't have, a good background or a good track record. So I do want to see that competence. but it's also if they come to me and they say, listen, 5 years ago, I lost my shirt, and here's what I learned from it. So I'm really conscious. I know what it feels like to be in that situation where you're thinking, oh my gosh, what do we do next?
Yes.
And it was because of this that now I do this. Can you see the difference? Like, you're vulnerable, you're letting them know what they are, but I can tell you that's what builds trust, but it has to be authentic, honest, and the truth.
Yes. And it doesn't need to be like, for example, if we stay in the example of financial advisor, it doesn't have to be, again, in finance, but it can be
Yeah.
like, I remember, when we bought our first home, we also felt, the worry, are we going to be able to pay it? Are we going to be able to, or when we were expecting our first child, or, it's those, whatever the client is living in terms emotionally, we've lived it somewhere in our life as well. So it's to open up and not just say, oh, I understand you. It's like, show that you understand.
Yeah.
Is there a question that you would have liked me or to ask you regarding trust and how to build trust?
I think you've asked, like, I'm trying to think. I mean, we covered reputation and trust and what you can build and being authentic and like all of those things. I feel like people, after listening to you, will have a really solid understanding of what they can do to build trust. So I can't think of anything, Sarah.
I'm glad that I think we touched on a lot of points and really concrete actions for people to like, because I think it's such, trust is such a big topic. A lot of people talk about it, but nobody knows before this interview with you what it was and how to build it, and maybe like the angles to be careful. So before we wrap it up, so I always play a game when I interview people, which are 3 surprise questions. So I pick 3 questions. I'm not going to know, and they're all about knowing the human behind the expert.
Okay.
Who is Lee? So we talked and you shared a lot on your expertise and your thought leadership. So now we want to know a little bit more about the human. So it's a question. I'll pick 3 questions, short answer, a word, a sentence, so we get to know you a little bit. Sounds good?
Sounds good.
All right. So our first question for today. Who are the most important, who is the most important, let me try that again. Who is the most important person in your world?
My husband. That's easy. My husband. I've been blessed with good marriage. We've been together for 39 years now, married for 38.
Wow. Oh, you got married pretty fast.
No, were we together for 2 years? We got married in 1984. Let's do the math there. So yeah, but we had dated for a couple of years before, traveled through Africa together, backpacked. Yeah.
So would you say that one of the key is to a long-term relationship like that, as time to start long-term marriage, is trust?
Trust and a sense of humor.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
You have to be able to laugh at yourself and them, and they have to be willing to let you laugh at them too.
Oh, that's such a key. Yes. All right. Second question. What are the biggest things you've learned in life to date?
That life always doesn't go to plan, that you have to be open, and that sometimes your biggest heartbreak is your biggest lesson that you need to learn.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'll take that one. I'll take that one. Thank you. And last but not least, what would you like people to say about you at your funeral?
That I was kind and I was a good friend.
Love it. Love it. Lee, thank you so much. Before we go, where can people find more about you?
Well, you can go to my website, and that is leabrovedani.com. And Lee is Lea, and Brovedani is Brovedani. So go to my website. You can go there. But I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. Instagram, I just post a lot of baking stuff for some reason. So,
Because it is for that.
and of course, Facebook, I'm known as the Trust Architect. You can look me up there, or send me an email, lee@leabrovedani.com, and please ask any questions that you have. This is my passion, and I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. So we'll put all your contact info in the description of the video so people can find you. And again, a huge thank you
Oh,
for
thank you for having
clarifying
me.
this topic that is so, so, so important, probably now more than ever.
I agree. I agree.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I hope you like this episode. Really, I think it's trust is such a big topic, and we kind of don't really know where to take it. So I really hope that this conversation gave you tools or gave you insight on maybe things that you do or you do not do. And this applies in really every area with your clients, with potential clients, with strategic alliances that you want to build, with your team, and obviously in every area of your personal life. So if you like this episode, definitely give it a thumbs up. I'd love to hear your comments, your feedback. So I put the information, Lee's contact information in the description. Become the trusted advisor for your clients. Now, probably more than ever, it's important to build trust. So if you're looking for more tools or get these episodes directly in your mailbox, make sure you subscribe to our blog, which is also known by the best blog. We talk about marketing, we talk about productivity, and we talk about all mindset and soft skills. All the tools that you need to really make a difference with the expertise that you have to offer. So thank you for being here week after week. Make sure you subscribe to our blog. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well and be notified to each episode that we have. And make sure to become a trusted advisor, because once we understand the architecture of trust, we see that so much more is possible. Thank you for being here week after week. And again, I will see you next Tuesday.